And welcome back to the Nose Plays. Today we're going to be looking at a new game that I've been completely enamored with over the last month or so. It's called Slay the Spire, and it's been around for quite some time at this point. But it is a fantastic little card game that I just can't get enough of. So today we're going to, in typical the Nose Plays fashion, go through a run of Slay the Spire, show off the game, and do a lot of really detailed discussion of just my thought process as I'm playing the game, because that seems to be the kind of content that most people enjoy when they watch me play. So if you've never played Slay the Spire before, this will be a great introduction for beginners, because I'm going to be going over a lot of beginner information, things that I've learned in the last month from watching other YouTubers and from playing the game. And yeah, let's just get right into it. So I'm going to turn Ascensions off. We'll talk about Ascensions later, but this is basically the challenge mode that unlocks once you have completed the base game. And we're just going to play it with no Ascensions this first time through. Also, the very first time that you load up Slay the Spire, you are going to be greeted with only one of these four character classes, and you'll have to play the game to unlock the other character classes. I have currently completed a non-ascension run with 3 of the 4 classes, and I'm working on getting a completion with the Watcher class. But today we're going to be looking specifically at the Ironclad. So the Ironclad is an interesting character. They have slightly more hit points than the other characters, and they also have this relic that they start with called Burning Blood, which gives them some healing. This is a very aggressive but also tanky character class. In terms of like RPG elements, this would be like your fighter, your warrior, your tank, your bruiser kind of a class, and the themes of the cards really play into that. This character is also in the lore cursed with like blood magic from a demon, and so there's a lot of demon and blood related talents. I kind of like the art style of this in certain images of the Ironclad, but the in-game model I'm not so crazy about. I do, however, I've seen some screenshots of Slay the Spire 2, which is set to be at least in early access next year, and I like the subtle changes they've made to this character. So I'm looking forward to Slay the Spire 2. But let's go ahead and jump in this run. Every run starts with this character, and I don't know much about the lore of this character, but basically they give you a starting boon of some type. So if we talk to them, we get to choose a modifier to the initial start of the game. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice is there's like a lot of icons and things that you should be familiar with. So first thing I'll point out is this here is our relic that we start with. Again, it gives us a little description of what it does. And as we collect more relics, they'll sort of stack up here, and we can always go back over here, mouse over them, and see what they're doing for us. In addition to that, we have our hit points. This is our current hit points. This is our total. We have money. Money can be used to buy cards, potions, and other things. We have potion slots in our belt. These are temporary bonuses for a single fight typically, and so we can collect these as we go through the run, and we'll talk more about potions. All the way over here is the map. And every map is procedurally and randomly generated, so you never know exactly what kind of a map you're going to get. You're going to start at the bottom, and you're going to climb the tower. Each one of these is a different type of encounter, which is demonstrated on the legend here. And if you mouse over this, it'll highlight a specific type of encounter. So if you're looking for like, hey, where's my next rest stop? You can use this to sort of help you find. And figuring out a good path is really, really important. You also might have noticed that there's a unique elite encounter It's called the Burning Elite, and this one has a special buff, but it also gives some extra and important rewards, which we may discuss. You can always come up here and click on this map at any time during the play, as long as this bar's up here. So keep that in mind if you ever want to check, like, hey, where's my next shop? Or, you know, when you're making decisions like this. The other thing is your starting deck. So every character class has a allotment of starting cards. Most of the starting cards are going to be basic cards, like strikes. These are how we get rid of enemies that we encounter. Blocks are how we prevent taking damage, and these are going to be really important at certain parts of the game. And then we have these special attack cards. So Bash is the starting special attack for the Ironclad. Deal 8 damage, apply 2 vulnerable. Vulnerable is a really cool mechanic where basically for the next 2 turns you get to deal a lot more damage with your regular attack cards. The downside to Bash, you may notice, is that it has a little 2 up here in the corner, and that means that it costs more to play it. And you have a limited number of energy points that you can spend each turn to play cards. So damage-wise, this is actually less damage than 2 strikes. But because of the vulnerable, future strikes that you play will do significantly more damage. So it can make up for that. But you got to be careful when you play Bash, because it's not always a good idea. And we'll talk about when that is. As we go through the game, we're going to collect a lot more cards, and we're also going to have the option to remove cards from our deck. And most people think that cards being removed from the deck when they initially start playing, including myself, is a bad thing. But actually, these cards that you start with are some of the worst cards in the game, just for damage or block per energy. And so getting them out of your deck so that when your deck does draw a hand of cards, you're going to get more cards that do more effects or have better energy efficiency. And it'll be more reliable when you're playing. So card removal is a big part of the game that you'll learn as you get better and better at building decks. So our starting boons, our starting options, we can just choose a card. This is kind of like Discover from Hearthstone or some of these other games where you get a pool of like 3 cards usually, and you get to take 1. Obtain 3 random potions can be really good. Potions are a great way to get through tougher fights like elites. They can really turn the tide of an elite fight where otherwise you would take a lot of damage or even get killed without them. Lose all gold and gain 16 max hit points. One thing to know about gaining max hit points is that you actually gain that much life as well. So for example, if I were to take this when I had 40 health, it would actually move me up to 56 total health, and then it would move my max health up to like 96. So max health is an interesting way to gain small amounts of health in the game, but also later in the game when you can get healing, you can start with more hit points at future parts of the game. And then the last one is we lose our starting relic, but we get a random boss relic. And most of the boss relics are really, really powerful. However, this is random. And some of the boss relics are not particularly great for starting. They're going to give you like basically no power or no effect at the beginning of the game. And so that can make the beginning of the game much more challenging if you get one that just doesn't do much for you until later. But most of them do have the potential to really make a strong run if you can get through the early game. And some of them can just give you a broken start. So this is like if you just want something really crazy, just want to do something really different, it's a great way to start your run. Let's go back and look at our map and see where's our nearest elite. Okay, so we've got some elites like right here. The way that every run of Slay the Spire starts, your first 3 combats that you encounter are going to be drawn from an easy pool of fights. So they're going to be a little bit easier on you than many of the fights you'll encounter later on this first floor. So depending on what we draw on these question mark sites, these unknown sites, these can have almost anything in the game, including some special events, which are really cool. But they can have fights. They can sometimes have elites. They can sometimes have merchants. They can sometimes have, I don't know if they ever have rest areas. I think that might be the one thing they don't have. But they have other events that will heal you. So it's okay to take some of these, but you don't want to take too many of them. Really, the way that you build a stronger deck and stronger character is by winning fights against normal and elite enemies. That's going to give you more cards to pick from and put in your deck. It's also going to give you more relics and potions and treasure. And so, I kind of like the look of this over here. The only thing that I'm concerned about is if we take the elite fight, we will miss the merchant. And I don't see another merchant anywhere on that path. So this is kind of a tricky one. A good rule of thumb is something like 3 fights and a campfire or a merchant, and then take on an elite. This path gives us something similar to that, but then we got to fight another elite immediately after with no potential healing in between, so that's a tough one. We definitely want a path towards an elite, and I think anytime you have like a pivot point like this where you have options, this is a really strong place where, like, if we get here and we're really beat up and we don't feel like we're strong enough to take this on, we can just go for the campfire and the merchant. And actually it's like double campfire merchant. Man, I really don't like the way that they path these. It's going to be really hard to get campfires, elites, and merchants are kind of all set apart where you can't really take them. But I think we'll just go ahead and start here. And then last but not least, this is our settings where we can change the settings of the game. If you ever do have to end a game early, you can save and quit and it will put you right back where you were when you come back. But one of the downsides of this game is you can only have one active save file at a time. And so if you're in the middle of a run, you have to finish the run before you can start another one with a different character or the same character. So this is what this button does if you want to abandon a run. I think we'll just go ahead and grab our first card and kind of see what we get for this first run. Okay, so we have 3 attack cards. All of these cards in the game are pretty good, but some of them are very specific to certain tactics and synergies. So some cards are only going to be good if you have the other cards that synergize well with it, and then other cards are just generically good. One of the ways that I like to measure whether a card is good or not is how much better is it than a strike or a block. And so this is a perfect example of a card that is just better than a strike in more than one way for the same cost. So it's 9 damage instead of 6, and we get to draw a card, which gives us more options for the rest of that turn if we haven't already spent all of our energy. It also helps us cycle our deck a little bit faster, and that can be really important in certain strategies. And we'll talk about that more when we get into the actual deck building. Thunderclap is cool because it provides some AoE damage, which can be really helpful. If you have like an enemy with a really low amount of health, you don't want to spend a whole attack to deal damage to it when you could be damaging the threats on the battlefield. And so this is a good way to like finish off something that's almost dead while simultaneously making all the other enemies more vulnerable to attacks and allow you to deal even more damage to them. So this is a good card for certain things. There are definitely better cards than Thunderclap for AoE. but it has its place. And there are certain things that definitely interact with the vulnerable that can add a lot of value to this card, specifically some of the relics. Clothesline is very similar to the bash card that we have already in our deck. Just to remind you, this is the bash card. But the thing about Clothesline is that it's more damage efficient. It's 2 energy for 12 damage. That's the same as 2 strikes, but it also applies 2 weakness. So this is actually a slightly stronger card than 2 strikes. So that's how you would kind of measure that. And it's also a little bit stronger than Bash in terms of the damage output. So any of these could be really good. Weak is essentially a pseudo form of block. It reduces the damage from an enemy, and the larger the amount of damage, the percentages work on bigger numbers more effectively. So you get more damage reduction the bigger the attack coming at you. So this is a really good card to help mitigate damage from elites. It's as energy efficient damage-wise as playing 2 strikes, but it also can reduce their incoming damage. So this is a really good card. I would take this since we're kind of looking at going right into that elite. If I wasn't going directly into the elite, then I think probably Pommel Strike is a more safe play. But we're definitely going to try to get that elite. And out of curiosity, there's no way to get 2 elites. It's either 1 elite and a bunch of fights, or we get stuck on this lone trail out to the side and it's 3 elites with no campfires. Oh, there's 1 campfire. And then there will always be a campfire right before the final boss. Also, the final boss we haven't talked about yet. I think every floor has 3 potential final bosses, and you get to see which one you're going to engage with. So we know for this first floor what the final boss is going to be. I believe this one's called Hexaghost. This one's not too bad. This one's kind of a damage race, so as long as we get enough damage before we get to this boss, we should be fine. What this boss does essentially is it has a large number of like 6 or 7 turns where it sort of just charges up a powerful attack and does a little bit of damage to you. And then if you get to like turn 7, it blasts you pretty hard, and that can just end your run if you don't have enough cards to deal with that, or you can't kill him fast enough. So yeah, this is kind of an unfortunate map for tutorial purposes, but alright, so we're in our first encounter. One of the interesting things about Slay the Spire is it's a tactics game. It's a turn-based tactics game in a sense, and that means that we have all the time in the world and all the information that we need to sort of make the best possible play that we can. So there's no clock, there's no time limit, and we have a lot of things to look at here. The first thing that you're going to notice is that the enemies are declaring what they're going to do, and most of the time it's going to be pretty obvious. Sometimes it'll be a little more vague, and it'll also show you all of the special things that are going on. So any buffs or debuffs, special blocks, special abilities, all of that stuff is going to be listed right below an enemy's health bar. We get similar status effects listed below ours. So we know that this enemy is going to be aggressive. They're going to attack us for 5 damage. And then after they receive the first attack on a turn, they're going to curl up into a ball and gain 6 block, which means that the next attack on them in that turn is going to have the damage reduced, or in our case, completely negated. So it wouldn't make any sense to attack this twice, and I'll show you why in a moment. Health pools and the amount of block and the amount of attack damage they get is semi-random, so it's not always exactly the same. but it is pretty consistent within a range of values. And there are attack patterns in this game. I haven't memorized all of them yet, but from what I understand, there's very few enemies in the game that can attack more than like 2 times in a row. So if an enemy attacks twice in a row or 3 times in a row, they'll never attack a 4th time or a 3rd time. I'll have to look into that and see if I can remember. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank as to whether it's 3 or 4 for a lot of enemies. But and then most enemies have multiple types of attacks, so they can do a regular attack or they have some other type of ability that they'll throw out there. So we have some options. One thing that would be interesting, since we have no defensive cards, so unfortunately we're taking 10 damage this turn, and there's very little we can do about it. If we cannot kill one of these outright, we'll take 10 damage. Now, we actually do have the ability to kill one of them, because a strike is 1 energy for 6 damage with 3. That means we can do 18 damage to a single enemy, and they both have less than 18 total health, so we can definitely kill one of them if we wanted to. That would mean we're only taking 5 damage, but it is going to take all 3 of our cards, or all 3 of our energy, to pull that off. I don't really see a better play. The other option would be to hit each one once, and then make them both very, very vulnerable to attack on the next turn, because they won't get their little block any longer. But here's the problem that we're going to encounter. So this button down here is our draw pile. This is the remainder of our 11 card deck. Over here in this corner is the discard pile. Right now, we draw a hand of 5 cards each turn, and we're going to get 5 of these 6 cards. The very best that we can do is 2 attacks, which means that next turn we're not going to have enough damage to kill one of these guys outright. That's fine. As long as we can block the incoming damage that they send our way, we should be in good shape. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and swing at this guy. That's going to reduce his output for damage. And then, because he only has 5 block and 1 hit point, a 6 damage attack will actually finish him off. But now we're out of energy, and notice that these cards are all red. That means that the little energy symbol goes red, that you cannot play them because you don't have enough energy. You'll also notice when you have no more active plays, the end turn button will start flashing. And we can always go in here and look at what cards have ended up in the discard deck if we're trying to remember for certain cards that interact with the discard pile. So these icons down here at the bottom are really helpful. You should definitely take a look at them occasionally. So we're going to take 5 damage. Not that big a deal, and we'll see why here in a moment. And he's going to come at us with 5 again, which is perfectly fine. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to strike him twice. The first one's going to go to his health pool. He's going to bring up this block. The second one's going to remove the block. And we really didn't need to remove the block because block falls off after the turn is over. So your block is not persistent in most cases. There are certain cards that will enhance your block. Okay, we're going to go ahead and throw out our own block. So this is going to give us 5 defense. Any damage that we take will come off of this first before it will hit our health. And since he's not very strong, he's not going to get through. And that will set him up for a kill. So we've got 3 attack cards, more than enough damage. The enemy intends to use a buff, so this little symbol usually means that they're going to buff something. What this usually means with the louse is that they're going to like enhance their strength for a future attack. And you'll see a little strength icon down here that will generate, and that is usually persistent. Alright, we'll go ahead and kill him. And that little 6 healing that we got there was actually from our burning blood. So that means that the 5 damage that we took earlier on in the fight was basically irrelevant. As long as we take less than 5, we're actually gaining, or sorry, less than 6, we're actually gaining health every combat. So this is what makes the Ironclad really durable and kind of tankier than the other classes, because he has built-in healing that none of the other classes start with. Alright, we got 16 gold to spend at the shop eventually, and we get to pick a card. So, excuse me, about to sneeze here. So every time we win a fight, we typically get our choice of 1 card out of a pool of 3. And from what I understand, the pool is pretty much completely random. However, it is weighted. So I believe in the early game, you tend to see a lot more commons. Cards that have a blue border are uncommons, so these are more rare. You won't see as many of these. And then cards that have a gold border are the rarest cards, so they're not going to show up very often at all. Gray cards are pretty common, and you'll see them quite frequently throughout the game. So let's take a look and see once again, how do each of these cards stack up to, say, a strike or a block. So this card, deal 9 damage, is already 3 damage more than a strike, so that's good. This definitely improves our damage output as we're cycling through our deck. It also takes a card from the discard pile and puts it on top of the draw pile. And so this is what I was talking about when we were looking at the discard and the draw pile. We can look in those 2 piles and we can see before we play this card, hey, is there something in the discard pile that I would like to play next turn? And I could then set up my turn in the future to draw it again immediately. So this is a really clutch card, sort of deck manipulation. Pretty handy, especially if you have a really powerful ability that you want to play multiple times in a combat. Reckless Charge. Deal 7 damage, shuffle a Dazed into your draw pile. This is a really aggressive card. 7 damage for 0 is pretty cool. This plays really nice with our Bash, because we can play the Bash and then get this card off without spending an energy, which leaves our remaining energy for another attack. So this is pretty good when paired with our Bash. The downside is the Dazed card gets shuffled into our discard pile. Or, sorry, in this case it's the draw pile, which means one of our future draws is going to be a dead draw. And that's one of the cool things about this game. There's a lot of enemies and mechanics where status effects are actually cards that get inserted into your deck, and as you rotate through your deck they can cause all kinds of problems. A Dazed is not the end of the world. It's a dead draw, but because it has the ethereal tag, after it's been drawn it basically gets destroyed, it gets disintegrated. So this is a cool way, if we're able to play it with our Bash, that we could get some really potent damage in a single turn. Rage. Rage is a skill card. Skill cards typically interact with block. So most of your skill cards are going to have some kind of interaction with block. Sometimes they have other effects that are pretty cool. But they don't typically do damage, although there are some skill cards that will. And when you have skill cards that do damage, they don't benefit from things like the vulnerable for the Bash. So that's good to know. This one says, whenever you play an attack this turn, gain 3 block. So this would be another good card that we can play with our Bash, which allows us to set up a turn of damage plus another turn of damage with those 2 stacks of vulnerable, and also get a little bit of block to help mitigate some of the incoming damage. So if we're going to be taking damage, but we still want to play our bash, this is another good card. So both of these would be pretty good interactions with our bash. If we look at our deck, however, the one card that I think stands out at the moment is our clothesline. Applying weak to an enemy stacks, and if we can play our clothesline and then pick it up with our headbutt and then play it again, that can put up to 4 stacks of weak, which will dramatically reduce the damage of an enemy for like 4 turns. So there's a pretty reliable chance that we would be able to do that with a headbutt card. The downside of taking the headbutt card is it's a common card and we'll probably see it again, where these cards are much rarer, and so we may not see them again. So the real question is, do we want to increase our damage, or do we want to have aggressive turns where we're still getting some block? And I think most of the elite fights are going to really benefit from having a little bit of block when we want to play a bunch of attacks. The downside to this card is if we don't have a handful of attacks when we draw it, it's kind of a dead draw. But our deck is attack heavy, so we're in pretty good shape. Ooh, who's jumping in to watch the stream?
Me.
Hey.
What do you...
I'm actually streaming on YouTube today, so...
Wait, let me just pick it up.
Alright, so now that we've talked about a lot of the cards, we're going to pick up the pace just a little bit. So this is going to set up weakness on the next turn, which is going to make his incoming attack next turn do less damage, and we can just throw another strike in there since we don't need to block. This is a perfect combo that we were kind of talking about earlier when we picked up this card. So this card really likes to be played with a bunch of attack cards. So if we play this card, we can basically spend our entire turn attacking, and we'll still generate a little bit of block that will stop the incoming damage. The vulnerable will also allow us to do bonus damage with this strike. And the cool thing is, you don't have to do this math in your head. If you look at the strike card, it's dealing 6 damage, but when I mouse over the vulnerable target, it automatically applies the 50% bonus damage, and it makes that number green, so it's easier to see. So we're going to be dealing 9 damage with that. And our 6 block's going to take on a little bit of attack. Alright, and then this guy's just toast because he's still vulnerable, so we don't have to really worry about this 9 coming damage as long as we can deal at least 14. And remember, we're dealing 9 per swing instead of 6, so it's only going to take 2 strikes to finish this fight. Easy pull fights are easy for a reason. Alright. So this might be a good time to pick up the Pommel Strike that we passed up earlier. Infernal Blade is an interesting card because it can give you a very, very powerful attack card that costs 0. And that can be extremely powerful. Some of the attack cards cost 3, they do a lot of damage. If you happen to draw one of those when you play this, it can be really good. The problem is it's random, and so you could end up with an attack that's just not very well suited for what you're doing. So it's high risk, high reward, and not one that I typically enjoy taking. But if you want to have some interesting moments, that one could definitely provide some interesting moments. Flex is a card that gives you strength, and strength is something that will just enhance the damage of your attacks. It only lasts for 1 turn. And there are certain cards that really benefit from strength, but we don't currently have any of those in our deck, so flex is not a very good pickup right now. So pommel strike is definitely the choice here. It's better than a strike, it draws a card. Alright, so in this situation, we got 11 damage coming in at us. And there is some temptation to try to block all the incoming damage, and you can definitely do that. But if you block all the incoming damage, we're going to be spending 3 energy to block 15, and we're only taking 11. Remember, our relic is going to heal us a little bit at the end of a combat, so taking a little bit of damage isn't that bad. The other thing to remember is we have a pommel strike in hand, which is going to draw us a card. And typically the rule of thumb is whenever you have cards that are going to draw, you always want to play those before you play anything else, just in case the cards you draw change your decision. So let's go ahead and play this first, and then let's reevaluate. Okay, so we've got almost all of our block in hand this turn. That means we're not going to get any block next turn, because this is the cards, or these are the cards that are left in our deck. The good news is Rage is going to be really, really strong if we pull it, because we're going to be able to get block from the Rage. So we have a very good chance of having a lot of attacks with Rage. So that's a good. The bad news is because we're not going to be able to draw any of these, we may want to use a couple of them this turn. So let's go ahead and play 2 defense. The rule of thumb with blocks is basically if you're using the block to absorb all of the damage, so all 10 points of this are going to get absorbed by this attack, it's pretty efficient to go ahead and do that. If you're over blocking, then you probably want to rethink whether that's the best play. And sometimes it'll still be the best play, but most of the time you're being energy and efficient when you do that. Alright, so this is pretty nice. The question is, do we want to set him up for more damage, or do we want to make him weaker? And at the moment, we know for sure we're drawing 2 strikes, and then our whole deck is going to be shuffled, and we may get some more defense. So, I think we'll set up the bash, which will mean that next turn we have a pretty high chance of killing him with the vulnerable. Any 2 strikes should kill him because they're going to do 9 damage each, so as long as he doesn't get too much block from whatever this is. Okay, so he did get some block, but I think we still have enough damage because this is going to be 18. And he's at 16 and 6, so that's a little bit more than we can actually get through this turn. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options because all we drew were strikes, so it's just going to be 3 strikes. Oh, never mind. I did miscalculate. 9 times 3 is 27. Yeah. I was doing 6 again instead of the vulnerable. Okay, cool. So we found our first potion. And so as long as we have an empty potion slot, we can pick this up. You do have the ability to discard a potion if you want to swap out a new one for one you've been carrying. And the way potions work in the game is pretty cool. So at the beginning of the game, you have basically a negative chance to find a potion. And then every floor that you move up, the chance gets higher and higher and higher until you get a potion, and then it goes back down. So if you haven't had a potion in a while, you're very likely to draw one eventually. But if you just got one in an encounter like we did, we won't see another potion for quite a while. This is a good potion. Alright, we've got 3 cards here. War Cry is more deck manipulation. So this will draw a card and then put a card back on the discard pile. Basically what this allows us to do is, there are going to be situations in your games where you have a card that would be really good to play next turn, but not the turn you drew it. And so having a war cry in hand allows you to put it back on top of the deck so that you can draw it next turn. This particularly works well with setup cards, so like you want to set up something with a bash and then do a really powerful attack next turn because you don't have enough energy. You could use Warcry to sort of manipulate your cards. Heavy Blade is a card that works really good with that flex card we saw earlier. It enhances the damage from strength effects 3 times, and so strength is multiplied. So the more strength you have, the more valuable this card becomes. But it is 2 energy for only 14 damage. That's slightly better than a strike, but not amazing. So without strength, this card is not super good. And then Iron Wave is an interesting card. It's weaker than a strike, but it also provides block on the same 1 energy. So one way you can think about this is it's the same energy as a normal block, but with damage. So that's pretty energy efficient, and I actually like having an Iron Wave in my deck. So I'm going to go ahead and grab an Iron Wave. Alright, so now we have another split here. We can take the unknown event, potentially. This could sometimes be a fight, sometimes be a merchant. Or we could do another fight and draw, or not draw, but pick another card. Our health pool is really good, so a fight would not be out of the question, but I think we want to see if we get a good reward here, because some of these have some really powerful rewards. So let's see if we get lucky. Okay. I've seen this event before, and I don't really remember whether this is worth doing. Obviously, it gives you the information you need. It's 50-50, so 50% chance we're going to get something good, 50% chance we might get something bad, or we can just lose a little bit of health and gain some more gold. If we look at the map, we're heading this route, and I think we notice that there's no merchants on this path, so getting gold like right now is not the highest priority. If we were going to pivot and go to that merchant, I'd consider the gold for sure. But since we're not, I think we're going to go ahead and roll the dice on this just to see what we get. Okay. For me, oh yes. Let's see what we got. Face of Cleric. At the end of combat, raise your max hit points by 1. Oh, that's very good, actually. So the more combats that we take, the more health we'll have for later in the game. Cool. So now maybe we, like, after this elite, prioritize taking as many fights as possible. That could be good. We'll have to consider that. Alright, so the Bandit. The Bandit is interesting. So the Bandit is on a timer. What he does is he'll spend several turns stealing gold from you, and then if you haven't killed him by a certain turn, he'll say something about a smoke bomb. If you don't finish him off immediately after that, he runs away with your gold and you don't get to get it back. However, if you kill him before he gets the smoke bomb off, then you get to collect all of your gold back from his dead body, as well as any other gold that he had on him in the normal rewards. So, pretty good. We got a really cool setup here. The only concern I have is if we draw a card after we play the bash, which we would want to do to get the vulnerable, we could draw something that we don't want to, and then we won't be able to play it until the deck cycles. So that's a risk you take when playing draw cards at the end of your turn, but I think it's worth it here because this is literally just a damage race. The other thing that we could do is we could play both of these defends and then just play the pommel strike and not take any damage, and maybe that's actually the right play. We are going to get 6 health back from our relic. I think just getting like a lot of damage on him is going to make it really fast. And we did draw the clothesline, which is unfortunate. I would have would like to play next turn. Staying at max health in a run of Slay the Spire is not really that important. There are definitely situations where you want to stay closer to max health, but for many of the runs, you're going to be taking on the final boss with, half your health or maybe even less in some cases. And a lot of those runs can still be successful. So Rage and Iron Wave is also really good here. And remember, we're getting bonus damage from the vulnerable, so that puts us at 8, that puts us at 11. Yeah, so that gave us plenty of block for the turn, so we didn't have to play this, and now he has 2 health left. So basically any attack will kill him next turn. And we're going to get our normal healing. And we got +1 max hit points, so we're actually getting 7 healing a turn. So that's pretty cool. We got our 30 gold back, we got 12 more gold, we got a flex potion. That potion is very strong with the heavy strike that we saw earlier, but it is only for like one swing. Okay. So card rewards. A second pommel strike wouldn't be terrible. Having more card draw is always good. Wild strike is very good efficient damage with a downside. So it's 1 energy for 12 damage. That's like 2 strikes for a single energy, which is also going to pair really nicely with our bash. But this puts a permanent card into our deck that is just unplayable. It's just a dead draw. And so playing this one time, not that big a deal. But playing this 2 or 3 times in a longer fight, and pretty soon we're going to get a bunch of these wound cards that can interfere with our turns. That being said, as long as we don't play it too many times, or we have ways to get rid of the wound cards, which there are some of, this could be good. And then Infernal Blade we already talked about last time, where it's just high risk, high reward, you never know what you're going to get. I'm leaning towards a second pommel strike, but I also think that's kind of boring. And so for the memes, maybe we just take the Infernal Blade. I've never really played with it before, so I don't know like if the numerical odds of getting like something really good are even remotely worth it, but most of the people I've heard talk about this card don't have a high opinion of it. But let's just grab it and see what we get. Alright, campfires are really important for healing and for improving your deck. We'll get a chance to talk more about campfires right here, but let's go ahead and get this elite fight. Alright, so most of the elite fights, and definitely the ones in the first floor, are basically just damage races with subtle differences. What that means is they're just going to swing at you with really big numbers every single turn. And there's basically no way that you're able to block the damage, so you're going to have to take some damage in order to win these fights. The whole thing that you really need to do is just put as much damage on the enemy as fast as possible, while occasionally using block to sort of offset and minimize some of your hit back. If you try to play too defensively, you're just going to get steamrolled. And notice these things have significantly more hit points than the normal enemies. So this one has a special mechanic. This enemy is sleeping, and what that means is we actually get some time to set up if we want. He will not wake up unless you break the 8 block. So if you do less than 8 damage to him, he basically stays asleep. And he will stay asleep for up to 3 turns, which at this point in the game means we could go through our entire deck, and if there were other cards that we wanted to like get in our hand before we start the fight, we could try to do that with almost no penalty. The trick is after that 3rd turn, he's going to wake up, and then we have to go regardless of what's in our hand. So I think the first thing that we want to do here is let's just see what random attack card we get. Okay. 21 damage for 0 is pretty good. This is an AoE attack that's pretty powerful, and for 0, it's actually really decent. The downside is it does put one of those burn cards in our deck. It's another status card. But that's not that big a deal. We definitely don't need to play Rage this hand, but I think we just go because we have, yeah, like there's no sense in just not going with this much damage in hand. Unfortunately, we're gonna get a lot of block. Between our Rage and our Iron Wave, and because he woke up, he's stunned this turn, so we're not even going to get attacked. But I think with that Immolate, we're going to be in really good shape to finish him off pretty quickly. This is a perfect opportunity to mitigate damage for a couple of turns, so we're going to Clothesline. And I could Pommel Strike to help cycle our deck a little faster, so let's go ahead and do that. And we're just going to take a big hit to the face. Alright, so 3 strikes I think is fine. We could play 2 strikes and a defend. We have all of our cards back in our deck now, so let's go ahead and block a little bit, just so we have some more health, because we're going to try to take a lot of fights later on. 52. This will be a good turn. Now, he's doing a status effect on us this turn, so we don't actually need the defense, so we've drawn these poorly both times, which is unfortunate. But I think if we play the Bash, we have extremely good odds of drawing the Immolate next turn, and it will do a massive amount of damage. So we'll be in really good shape to finish him off. So here's our debuffs that he put on us. This is the turn. If you don't have him almost dead by this turn, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Because after he debuffs you, now all of your cards deal less attack damage, and all of your blocks block for less. So you'll notice the numbers are red. That means we're being debuffed. And unfortunately, we did not draw the card we wanted, but because we have Pommel Strike, and because there's only 1 card left in our draw pile, we can get the clutch play. The 0 cost on this card is only the first time it's played, which isn't as good as I thought it was, but we have the energy to play it, and 30 damage is going to finish him off, so that all worked out pretty well. 7 health back, so we're looking pretty good. Amamore, negate the next 2 curses you obtain. So looking at special events or other things that trigger curses, this basically gives us protection from 2 curses. So we'll have to look for those. Okay. So 3 very interesting cards. The first card we'll look at is the Exhume. This is a card that is rare because of the gold border, so we won't see these very often. And what it does is, when cards get exhausted, they get put in kind of an exile pile that sets them off to the side for the rest of the combat. They don't get to be used again. This allows you to recover one of those powerful cards and play it again. So if you have enough cards that are really powerful but exhaust after use, This could be a really cool way to get a second chance to play them. We don't really have anything like that in our deck right now, so even though it's a rare card, it's not one I would take here. Shrug It Off is basically a better version of block. It's very similar to Pommel Strike. It's 8 block for 1 energy, which is 3 better than the normal block, and then you draw a card. So again, deck cycling. We haven't added any block cards to our deck yet, and so this wouldn't be a bad pick, but one of the concerns I do have is that all of the attacks that we have in our deck currently are all single target attacks. We have no AoE attacks at all. And there are definitely a bunch of fights where having some type of AoE attack where you can hit everything on the field is going to be really helpful. The only one we've seen so far earlier was the Vulnerable, and it's not a great one. This one is a little more interesting. You spend X energy, which is basically whatever energy you have remaining, all of it gets spent, and then it does some kind of a multiple effect. So this will deal 5 damage to all enemies that many times. So if we spend all 3 energy, it's 15 damage to all enemies for a total of 45 damage. That's pretty good. It's pretty good, and this will fill a niche that we really need moving forward. Alright, so this is a pretty decent setup. So we could go ahead and do 15 damage to both of these guys right off the rip, but this card actually pairs really well with our Flex Potion too. And maybe this is a good time to test that out. So if I'm not mistaken, Flex Potion gives us 5 strength, which adds 5 damage to this card. 5 damage would be 10. That would be 30 points of damage to both enemies. I mean, that sets us up for a very clean kill next turn. The other option is we use our Rage and we play 3 attacks, and the 3 attacks generate 9 block, because we are getting hit for quite a bit here. We don't have any real way to deal 30 points of damage without using the Whirlwind Flex Potion, I don't think. I could throw the Explosive Potion too, though. Okay, so if we Rage, and then we Pommel Strike, Clothesline, Explosive Potion, and this still counts as an attack, even though it will be for 0, I can still play it. And it's actually going to trigger another instance of our Rage. So, remembering that X cards can be played for 0 sometimes has synergy that is important to be aware of. So that's going to save us another 3 health. Iron Wave blocks for 5. So it's either Strike, Iron Wave, Defend, or Bash, Iron Wave. I think Strike, Iron Wave, Defend is okay here because we're trying to make sure we don't take too much damage. It's a little bit of overblock, but that's okay. We got a lot of fights that we want to get to maximize the effect of this Face of the Cleric. Alright, so whatever this comes out as is going to be a 3. So we should probably play that. Ah, okay, Hemokinosis. lose 2 hit points but deal 15 damage. Pretty solid attack. I think this puts us within lethal. Yeah, just exactly lethal. So, cool. Get rid of that one. Heal our 7. And find a new card. Alright, so you may have noticed a theme that a lot of the Ironclad's cards have a downside of adding wounds or other negative cards into their draw pile for future turns. This class, in many ways, is all about beat them down fast and don't worry about it. The problem is, if you don't end up winning the fight quickly, these cards, as I pointed out, will stack up in your deck, and then they can really cause your deck to run out of steam and slow down. It's a really cool mechanic that's very thematic and makes sense. It's like you're going all out as an attack or a block or whatever, and then if you survive, and you win the fight, great, but if you don't, you get in a lot of trouble. So this is kind of another one of those massive amount of block for 1 energy, but a pretty significant downside if the fight goes long. This card is more reliable, less block, but the draw is often helpful, and it doesn't have the downside. We already have an AoE attack. I don't know that we need a second one. If we had any way to generate more energy, which we'll get later on, playing a Thunderclap with a Whirlwind can be really exciting combo, but I think we'll just take the Shrug It Off. We definitely need to make sure we don't get too many attack cards without block cards. I like a general rule of thumb. I like to have at least 30-ish% of my deck as block. Something like 70-30 feels pretty good. When you start getting lower than that, it gets really hard to have block cards on the turns you need them. And we get our first Campfire. Campfire always starts with these 2 events. This one gets unlocked later. We won't talk about it today. But there are certain relics that will give you even more events to pick from. One event is the shovel will allow you to dig for more relics. There's a peace pipe which will allow you to remove cards from your deck. And there's a couple other ones. I can't remember all of them. We're probably going to go to the smith here. This tells us that we could heal 24 max hit points, 30%. And that's 30% of our max total. So as we keep gaining life, that number is going to get bigger and bigger. And that could put us like basically at full health at this point, but there's really no reason to do that. We have our healing effect, and so if we can get through fights with taking very little damage, we're going to naturally heal anyways. But what we could do is we could go to the smith and we can upgrade one of these cards and make it even more powerful. One card that I'm thinking of upgrading is actually Whirlwind. Because we only have 1 AoE card, we really want it to be as impactful as possible. So this is definitely one card that I would want to upgrade with within the deck. Rage is another one that could allow us to continue to play aggressively, but take even less incoming damage when we get a good card draw with the Rage. Iron Wave just makes this card slightly more efficient. But Bash becomes much more palatable to play when it's upgraded. And the damage still isn't as good as the Clothesline, so it's still kind of inferior damage-wise up front, but 3 turns of vulnerable damage on all of our other attack cards can really add up to a lot of extra damage. And so that's why it's tuned down a little bit on the energy efficiency up front. But having 3 turns of vulnerable just gives us so many more options. So I think it's going to be this card. It's going to feel a lot better when we do end up playing that one. So now we have another path decision here to make. We can go into another fight, or we can go directly into another campsite and upgrade another card before we take any more fights. I'm thinking that it might be worth also getting the Whirlwind upgraded. Clothesline upgraded also adds another turn of weakness, which is another great candidate. And then Infernal Blade goes to 0 cost. That makes that a lot more interesting and more efficient. Especially when we draw it with the bash. Bash into a 0 cost Infernal Blade with the right random attack could be just absolutely devastating. The more reliable pick is going to be one of these two, and I think it's going to be Whirlwind. So I think we are going to go this way and get the second campaign. 51 gold. Every 10th attack does double damage. This is something I've not mastered yet. So these relics up here, every once in a while they have like these time triggers, and so this is one of those time triggers, and you'll notice there's a number underneath it. That number is going to count as we make attacks throughout the rest of the game, and every time we get to the 10th one, if we're paying attention, we can get a lot of bonus damage out, especially if we play a really big attack. So we definitely want to remember that, especially as that number starts to count up. But I often forget to even pay attention to it. Let's go ahead and smith another card. Let's get that. Oh, no, not that one. Where'd it go? Whirlwind. Let's get that upgraded. And then we're going to take as many fights as we can stand. Alright, so got 12 incoming. We can reduce that with the clothesline, and then probably block it with the shrug, and then maybe play the whirlwind. Oh no, that'll be all of our... Yeah, let's just start off with that. So that's 9. So we can play this for 8 damage, or we can just block. I think we'll just block. We definitely, when we have an opportunity to block, we'll want to do that. Just because of the number of fights we're going to be taking. Alright, so this is a perfect setup for Rage. That gives us the block for this turn due to Weakness. Weakness is going to wear off after this attack, though. So now he's got a 7 damage attack, but this one is going to have a negative effect on us. So it's either going to give us a weakness or break our armor or something like that. He's only got 16. We've got 9 and 6 and 5, so we've got more than enough damage to just finish him off. And now we're going to start healing back up. Dexterity Potion. This is going to give us a permanent +2 to all of our block for the remainder of the fight. So every time we play a block card, instead of 5, it's going to be 7 or +2 to whatever the default number is. That could be really good against an elite or against a boss. So we'll probably want to save that for the boss if we can. And then we get to add a card. Inflame, gain 2 strength. Power cards are really important. They are interesting in that once they're played, they get consumed by your hero. So they're actually like played on your hero as a status effect. And so this is just a permanent +2 strength on our hero for the remainder of the fight once we play it. The downside to a lot of these power cards is they can be a little slow. This one we can actually take advantage of immediately. The problem is we don't have a lot of cards that really benefit from strength. The cards that we have will all benefit a little bit from strength, but only Whirlwind is really going to notice a significant impact from strength. And so I'm not sure that that's the right card for us at the moment. That also means that Flex is in a similar position. It's free, and it's only for that turn, so if you draw this into a bunch of block cards, it's pretty terrible. But if you draw it any other time, it's just free damage. Wild Strike, however, is just a lot of damage up front for 1 energy. And again, this card's going to pair really nicely with Bash, especially now that we have 3 turns vulnerable. It's very, very likely that we'll get an opportunity to play this for 18 with the vulnerable debuff. Also notice we're at 8, so our second attack going into next turn could do double damage, which again pairs really nice with this Wild Strike. A little unlikely, but if we ever get the opportunity to play something like Wild Strike into the pen nib, it could be really, really good. So I think we're going to take that. So in this situation, I think the right play is to do double damage on the Whirlwind. So this would be 16, right? If we play it next turn. Yeah. So let's just throw out the Pommel Strike. Oh, so tempting. Alright, so this is going to do 16 times 2, and it's double, right? What I don't remember is this the 9th attack, or is this the 10th attack? Okay. Alright, well, let's find out. So if I play this, that'd do 24 or 12. Okay, that was it. So I should have played the Whirlwind. Yeah, that would have been much better to play the Whirlwind there. Alright, now I know how the counter works. I should have paid attention to that before, but like I said, I often forget these are even up here, and I never really notice. You may have noticed that the numbers went green when this was at 9, and that was indicating that it was already applying the bonus damage. So I should have noticed that, but I did not. Alright, so we can Wild Strike, we can Iron Wave, and that's pretty much it, right? Yeah, Strike finishes him off. Still gained net positive health. Distilled Chaos. Play the top 3 cards of your draw pile. This potion gets really powerful as your deck is almost empty, because you basically guaranteed to know what those cards are. Okay, so we know about Shrug It Off. Second Wind. Exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand. Gain 5 block for each card exhausted. What this is going to do is it's going to basically consume a bunch of cards that we may not want to play in exchange for a large amount of block. We don't really have enough cards that synergize with this right now, but Battle Trance is just a really good card. There's going to be a lot of times in the game where we have a setup we're trying to play, and we're one card away from having the combo we need. This definitely gets us draw into those combos more frequently. So we're going to grab that. Alright, this is a great opportunity for Whirlwind. Unfortunately, no Whirlwind in hand. We have basically a 1 in 3 chance of drawing it next turn. We have a lot of damage coming our way, so the Rage is going to give us a 9 block, or I can get 6. No, I can't even get 6 block because I don't have 2 1-cost attacks. So it's either 6 block or we play 1, 2, and then see what we get. Let's play the Rage. Okay, so now we've got the Wild Strike. So now I can Wild Strike defend. That feels pretty good. Wild Strike straight up kills one of these guys because it's such high damage. So we can just get rid of this one. And then we can play the block to soak some of the damage from next turn. Cool. And then could try to draw our Whirlwind. There we go. Alright, what we have here. Play the top card of your draw pile and exhaust it. Dark Embrace. Whenever a card is exhausted, draw 1 card. We don't have a lot of exhaust in our deck at the moment, but Shockwave is a really cool card. Shockwave applies 3 weak and vulnerable to all enemies. It's a one-time use, but it sets up 3 turns of really, really easy play, because you're going to be dealing a lot of damage and you're going to be receiving a lot less damage. I think we'll grab the Shockwave. This will be our last fight before the boss. Slime is pretty easy fights. One thing to keep in mind with the slimes, whenever they take 1 point of damage below 50% health, they will immediately change their current action to split. And whatever their health total is, that is what they will split into 2 slimes with that health total. One of the interesting tactics for these guys is if you can get them just above half health and then finish them off the next turn or get them extremely low, when they inevitably split, they have like 1 or 2 hit points each, and it's really, really easy fight. We could try to battle transfer more attack cards and then play the Rage into more attack cards to get some block that way. We could play our Shockwave, strike, defend, with the Rage giving us a little bit more defense. I think setting up the Shockwave for the next 3 turns makes this fight pretty easy. The downside to status effects on slimes is when they split, they remove all debuffs. But no sense drawing cards there. So we have a vulnerable enemy here. Notice when I grab this card, the damage increased to 12, stating the vulnerable damage is going to be applied 3 times. 3 times 12 is 36. That's going to put him significantly below half health. Is this a flex play? 12 plus 5 is 17. Yes. Let's go ahead and do this. So we haven't received a potion in a minute. We got this one not too many turns ago, but now it's 19 times 3. That's almost 60 damage. That should kill him. And now you see the power of setting up the vulnerables. We've been talking about how that potion was going to pair really nice with the whirlwind for a while. And that was a perfect example of how you can do that. Don't feel like you have to hold on to your potions forever. If you see a really good play with a potion, it's often just go ahead and do it. Especially if it's going to save you a significant number of turns in health. Okay, so I've talked quite a bit throughout this run about strength not being great with the cards that we have. Sword Boomerang is a perfect example of a card that benefits greatly from strength. Cards that multi-attack apply the strength bonus on each of the attacks, which basically multiplies the effectiveness of strength. There's a number of cards throughout the game that we haven't seen that do these types of multi-attacks, and so if you're filling your deck with a lot of multi-attack cards, a great way to really make it pop off is to find ways to build strength into your deck, whether that's through other cards or through potions. They become far more valuable. For us, we're not really leaning into that, and so I'm not so sure that this is a great pickup for us. We don't currently have any cards that can cause ourselves damage. We've played a couple. We generated that Hemokinosis earlier, but this is a power that's really effective with the right synergies. Otherwise, it's kind of useless. Blood for Blood, however, is a really good card. It doesn't look good on the surface, but it gets to be really, really good. And what it is in a long fight with a boss, you're almost inevitably going to be taking damage, as you saw with the earlier elite that we fought. Every time we take damage, this card gets cheaper until it costs 0. And then for the remainder of that fight, this card just pops off for 18 damage for no energy. And again, pairs really nicely with the bash or other vulnerable status effects. So I think it's Blood for Blood on this one. Now we're getting to that point in the game where our deck's feeling quite a bit more bloated than it was when we only had these cards, these 10. It's taking significantly longer to get back through the deck when we only draw 5 at a time. Things like Battle Trance, Shrug It Off, and Pommel Strike are helping to speed that process up a little bit. But the other thing that we can start considering, even though it doesn't always feel good initially, is we can start removing some of these bad cards. Some of these cheap cards that are just not very good compared to what we would rather have in our hand. And that's exactly what we're going to do when we get an opportunity to. Unfortunately, I don't have an opportunity to do that. We have 73 health going into the boss, and our next attack that we do is going to be our 10th, so that's cool. Keep that in mind for our first turn. I don't think there's any reason that you would want to rest here. We're basically at full strength, so we definitely want to smith another card. The question is, which card? Smithing Blood for Blood makes it go to 0 that much quicker, and it's also +4 damage when you upgrade it. So that's pretty solid. Wild Strike goes to 17 damage for 1, which is also really, really good. Pommel Strike is interesting upgrade because it actually increases the draw and the damage ever so slightly. Drawing 2 cards is pretty powerful at the right time. And then again, this is our third application of weak, so we can just keep things weaker for much longer. Shockwave is 5 weak and vulnerable. I'm really kind of leaning towards Blood for Blood or Wild Strike. I think the Blood for Blood, getting it down to 0 cost quickly is going to be the key to winning some of these elite fights moving forward. And so that's the one we're going to go for. Alright, on to the Hexaghost. We got 2 potions, so feel pretty good. I am going to go ahead and just immediately drink the Dexterity Potion. This will last for the remainder of the fight, and every time we play a block card, we just get to add 2 to it. We also managed to draw one of our best cards for the Pen Nim, which is this Blood for Blood. It's going to go ahead and swing for 44. And unfortunately, I have no way to apply a vulnerable before that. But if I could, that would be great. So is there any... The only thing we could potentially draw into that we would play might be this Rage. But I think 44 damage up front is just too good to pass up. It's basically 20% of his health. So that's going to give us a great start. Since we're out of energy, drawing more cards not probably the best idea, because we don't want to draw our better cards and then not be able to play them. So we'll just end the turn. Alright, so he always opens up with a really powerful attack, and then his attacks sort of get significantly weaker for about 6 turns, and then he comes at you with another really big one. So we're definitely going to take some damage here. The question is, what are the odds of us, like, hitting some defense this turn? I'd really love to play the Bash and set up vulnerable for the rest of this fight. We're going to take a lot of damage if we do. One thing to remember about the floor fights, at least at the base difficulty of the game, as long as you finish the boss with 1 hit point, you immediately heal back to full going into the next floor. So your health at this fight is a resource that you definitely want to spend when appropriate. 7 times 6 is a lot of damage, but setting up 50% more damage for the next 3 turns is basically the way that we're going to be able to outrace this guy. So I think this is almost a must play here. And then that means we could like swing into him with the Wild Strike, or we could save 7 health. 35 damage versus over 40. This is one of the best cards that we have to play into. I think we're going to go for it. Unfortunately, that means 2 of our block cards are just gone, and we're not going to see a lot more block for the next few turns, but we really want to play a lot of attack cards anyways. We're just going to try to race him and see if we can do more damage than he does to us. So after that attack, notice all of his orbs were green, and he did that massive attack. What's going to happen now is he's going to swing at us with some status effects and some light attacks, and each turn one of these is going to go green, and then when all 6 of these are green, which would be on turn 7, he's going to bring another one of those and basically kill us if we don't have him really, really close to dead. So the good news is we've got Iron Wave, which is nice here, because that just soaks all the damage, and then we can play the other damage cards. So Iron Wave, Pommel Strike, and Strike. Probably should have played the Pommel Strike first, just in case we drew something better. So that was a little bit of a misplay. Also keeping an eye on our pendant. We're at 5. So whirlwind here is 12 times 3. We have no way to block the 10 incoming damage, so let's just get the 12 times 3. Alright, the rage is a really good draw here, except for the fact that we have no attacks to go with it. Shrug it off. Okay, cool. So we got our Wild Strike. I can play the Rage. We really don't need to, but just out of habit, play the Rage into the Wild Strike to get more block. And then we can also throw the Defend out there, because there's nothing better to do. Alright, Shockwave. Is the Shockwave worth playing here? Alright, we're gonna try something here. This is maybe a little sus, but I think the only card I would not want to see is Whirlwind, I think. So we're gonna play this. And I'm going to drink the Distilled Chaos. This is going to have 3 attacks go off, but he's got vulnerable, so hopefully we get... Nice! Okay. And we got the Emulate. There we go. And then I think we're like very close to killing him here. Yeah, that was perfect. So we got kind of lucky on the draws, but that was a lot of damage. And again, the vulnerable from Shockwave and Bash really paying off in this fight. He's got 12 block, but that's not going to save him because we have 2 attacks. Alright, and there you have it. So there's our first floor complete. That is going to end the video for today. We'll talk a little bit about the rewards before we do. My goal is probably to do 1 video per floor with this character, and then we'll move on to the other characters. And so we'll see how it goes and see how people are enjoying the content. But I'm enjoying the game a lot, and I'm learning a lot. Not an expert player by any sense of the word, but I have completed it at the normal difficulty and have started climbing the Ascensions. So the Ascensions are much more challenging, and I'm already seeing some difficulty on some of them. So let's go ahead and grab our rewards. We got Essence of Steel, 4 plated armor. This means that we just generate 4 armor every turn until the armor gets broken. And then it goes down to 3, and then it goes down to 2, and then it goes down to 1. But if they don't break the armor, then we keep it at whatever number it was the previous turn. And then every time you defeat a boss, you are guaranteed a pull of rare cards. Rare cards are not always the best cards, but they're always situationally great. And so they can be really amazing in the right circumstance. Fiendfire allows us to destroy a bunch of cards in our hand and deal a lot of damage in return. So it's similar to the defensive version of this that we looked at earlier. A lot of people don't understand that exhausting cards in your hand is actually beneficial in certain fights. And if you get the right hand of cards, like say it's a bunch of cards that are kind of weak for the fight that you're in, you can basically remove those for that fight and never draw them again. It also makes your deck smaller, which means your best cards are coming up more quickly. So Fiendfire actually has a really powerful place in the Ironclad's deck. Demon Form. At the start of your turn, gain 2 strength. This card I like a little bit better than some of the other ones that we were looking at, like in Flame, because it's basically infinite scaling. And so the longer the fight goes, the stronger and stronger and stronger your character gets. The problem with this card is that it is a do-nothing card the turn it's played, and it takes all of our energy to play it. That's a little bit rough. Bludgeon is just a very energy-efficient damage card, especially in its upgraded form. I believe it's like 14 points of damage per energy or something like that. Oh, it's got to be more than 14. Is that right? I gotta do the math now. Oh, 14. I was right. So 14 points of damage per energy is pretty solid. It's not as good as like the upgraded Wild Strike or the Blood for Blood once it goes to 0, but and it does take all of your turn to do it. So drawing this on a turn where you need to block or you need to play Rage with a bunch of attacks to get the block, not going to synergize particularly well, but playing this the turn after you played Bash, yeah, very good. That's going to be close to 60 something, almost 70 points of damage with the vulnerable mark on the enemy. But I like the demon form here. I think we can actually now start looking for cards that benefit a little more from strength besides just Whirlwind. And then this will just help us in those longer elite and boss fights. So, all right. The last reward that you get whenever you finish off a boss is a special chest with special relics. So these are boss relics. They're drawn from a very specific pool of relics. And they're all very interesting modifiers to your character. The Cursed Key. Gain 1 energy at the start of your turn. Whenever you open a non-boss chest, obtain a curse. That could be problematic. Curses are pretty bad, but we have the Omamori, which cancels the first 2 curses we get. So the first 2 non-boss chests that we open, like the one that gave us this and the one that gave us that, we don't get a curse for. So that could definitely be good. Gain energy at the start of your turn, you no longer gain gold. That basically means we'll only get a chance to go to 1 shop, maybe 2, with the amount of gold that we have. Shops are really, really important ways to improve your deck, and unfortunately we didn't find any on this last run, but and then the Slaver's Collar is gain 1 energy, but only during the boss and the elite fights. So this makes bosses and elites a little bit more manageable because you get to play basically an extra strike or an extra block. Or you get to play more of those 2-cost cards. But I think this does the same thing with less downside, at least initially. Because we do get those curses canceled, so I think we're going to go with the key. And that's going to wrap it up for today. So hopefully you're enjoying this. If you are, go ahead and leave me a comment or like, and let me know what you think of the format. If you have any tips or tricks that you've learned playing Slay the Spire, please leave them there as well. I love discussing tactics in the game, and if I misspoke on anything or have some details wrong, you more experienced players let me know. And until next time, this has been The Nose Plays, and you guys have a wonderful day.